Call the meeting to order at 5:30 by that clock, 5:33 by that clock. So pick a
5:30
number.
sounds
Pick a
good.
number.
5:30.
Any adjustments?
I believe I have one, possibly two. So I would like to add to select board items, grant agreement resolution, as it needs action. Neil Madow is here tonight. He requested to be on the agenda last night. I was thinking he could be under public comment. Do you expect action from the select board tonight?
No, but maybe just kind of a feel for how my question will be received is good enough for now. I don't expect.
So it may be an item that may need to be tabled.
This is sidewalk discussion
Sewer and water
at
discussion.
large.
Also, I didn't want to bring up the sidewalk, but on a separate.
I think we should put it under select board items,
Yeah.
because if it's tabled, then we can take action later. So we'll fit him behind animal advisory.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep. Okay. That's it for adjustments. Approval of minutes.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes of September 26th and October 10th.
I second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of September 26th and October 10th as presented. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have a few minor corrections. I guess one is on the 26th, the first paragraph, number 3, select board items, public hearing, should read blah, 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 at the fire department. They both re-emphasized the importance of the regulations rather than re-empathized.
Sorry, say that
Oh, yeah.
again. Where?
Right here.
Right here.
Emphasized instead of empathized.
Even though we
Emphasized.
do
We do empathize.
empathize,
Yeah.
yeah.
And are willing to do it again.
Yeah.
We'll re-empathize.
Yeah. And then the only one, the only other thing, and it doesn't really matter to me, is it's officially, I think that meeting I opened.
Oh, because I
You
was.
did.
I think
late.
Yes,
That's
you
right.
did.
Yeah,
Whether that matters,
Yeah.
I don't really care. But
yeah, no, I was late for that, so under item 1, call to, this is on September 26th, item 1, Steve Head opened the meeting at 5:10. And then one other,
What paragraph was that in?
that's right at the beginning, item number 1.
Yes, the
Oh,
change of
The
the
size.
That's right there.
And then on October 10th, just wrote in item number 5, select board items, first sentence, just erosion is spelled wrong, so. All right.
And then just
Yeah.
the last thing is just on the 10/10/2018.
Yeah.
Again, very minor. Number 6, last bullet point, just Westminster Road.
Is
Yeah,
not too
that's
late.
it.
Yeah.
Space.
Yep.
Spell check.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a few of us all.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of September 26th and October 12th with those minor modifications. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public comment on items not on the agenda. You're all here for specific purposes, I think, so. Unless anybody has anything separate from that, let's keep going. So, select board items, Putney Community Cares allocation discussion. Dylan, you heading that up?
Yes.
So, and we've been asked to remind people to just state your name when you first talk, once you introduce yourself.
All right, Diamond Devlin. Putney Community Cares. And I apologize, I'm losing my voice a little bit, so I'll try to speak up here, but members of Putney Cares and Putney Family Services had come before the board earlier this year to discuss a planned merger and request that we be able to maintain the same level funding as a combined organization as the two. And at that time, we discussed coming back in the fall, making an official proposal for a change to the allocation formula. I believe that you received something for tonight that is the proposal in writing, which, so I wasn't going to, reread that or, but just to be here and say that we have since merged. That's been a very positive thing. It's allowed us to provide services across a continuum, which has been great for the people who are accessing services. It's been fairly budget neutral for us. We didn't eliminate any staff or consolidate the rental space, anything like that. Continuing to provide the services, it would be very helpful for us to continue with the same funding level under a different allocation strategy with a different tier system in the proposal. And wanted to know if you had any questions specifically about the daily services or anything since we last talked.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at this stuff and it gets kind of complicated.
Right.
The one thing I was thinking with the way that you had split it up here, to me, in a sense, it sounds fine, with the exception of what happens if there's another public service agency, Putney one, fit into that grouping A. That would throw things off. Not that, I don't know if it will be or not, but I don't know how we'd have to deal with it again then.
Yeah, I think conceptually, I first saw this last night, so we haven't had a whole lot of time to think about it, so I don't think we'll probably take any action on this tonight. But I think conceptually, this works well to accomplish what we thought we would be trying to accomplish. If there are other ways to think about it, and I would invite anybody who has comment on it now or till our next meeting to let Karen know or one of us know. I think that certainly achieves the intention of the board based on the discussion that we had whenever that was in the spring, I think.
And also just wanted to note that representatives from Putney Community Cares did speak to the other two organizations, in the other tier, and they were fine, comfortable with that approach. So it was a very transparent process, and they were included in that. So that was important to us.
Yeah, I think that the slightly challenging thing would be to clarify for those who are reviewing this in 5, 10, 15, 25 years, why that happened and how it was determined. And, it's sort of obvious based on the merging of the two, but I'm not sure it would be obvious if one were strictly looking at the numbers, why it would be broken up like this. So I think we just need to be sensitive to that. And I think, again, if nothing else in the short term, i.e. this year's budgeting process, I think this definitely makes sense. And then if we have to sort of reconsider it in order to make it so that if somebody else came along, or if we were looking at strictly at number served or purposes served, there might be a more effective way of doing that. But I think this is good for now. So, you got anything to add to that?
I agree as a temporary fix, but I do think it needs to be revisited, and we need to delve into it a little deeper and come up with something more permanent.
And, it also may be that as a temporary fix, it's good for the next 25 years.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If we don't have anybody else come along, then maybe it's a non-issue. If suddenly in the next 5 years we had 2 other organizations that cropped up, which I don't anticipate, but you never know. how that would shift it. So we should probably, as we review the social services budget, maybe we can review, again, numbers served and things like that, and just see how that equation works out in the sort of more, I don't know, I mean, I guess we just, maybe it has to be more proportional based on services provided, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure that there's an accurate way we would be able to,
We can look at other towns
Yeah,
and see how they do it.
yeah,
that's a good idea.
Because I do know some towns, if it's a community-based social service, they tend to give more.
well, that's, I mean, that's
Yeah.
exactly what this
Right.
whole category
Yeah.
A is, so,
And those numbers too, once we get a draft budget in place, then we're gonna know what
Yeah.
those numbers look like.
yeah.
We'll have a better understanding.
And also, when the requests are in,
Yes,
they have numbers served, et cetera, on them typically, I think. I know we ask for them sometimes.
yeah, and you approve them as well.
Exactly.
Because they come in front of you before they
Right.
even make
Go to
the
the
budget.
Yes.
Yep.
So, I think this is a good working document.
Yeah.
I think that we all were present for the discussion before
Yes.
and definitely fully understand the intent. So for the foreseeable future anyway, let's stick with this and then see whether there's a more or clearer equitable way to divide it and go from there. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, thank you. If there's anything else in addition to numbers
You can
served
provide.
for data
Yeah.
that we can provide, just let us know, and we'll be happy to get that to you.
Okay, sounds good. Good, thank you. All right, Putney Fire Department draft budget. Either of you want to sort of lead
Tom's
this,
here.
or,
He's
yeah?
gonna take the lead on this.
Have you folks had an opportunity to review it at all? Or no?
Very briefly last night.
So at face value, our proposed budget is up a fair amount, but for specific reasons. We're actually, along with everything else that's in here, we're actually trying to fund two specific initiatives for the members of the department, and those two requests come at the end of a lot of review, a lot of study, a lot of input, a lot of discussion, and unanimously on the part of the members. One of those, on the first page of my summary and narrative, involves funding, which is brand new for us, funding physical exams for everyone. We had first started to look at annual physicals, and the reality was we felt, and they felt, that the cost for that would be too great. So we opted to look at physicals being conducted every 2 years. The reasons for that are pretty significant in today's world, with what all of our folks are exposed to on a very regular basis. We feel and they certainly feel it's well worthwhile, in the form of well worthwhile to be able to identify as soon as possible if in fact there is an issue, respiratory function-wise, respiratory system-wise, cardiovascular system-wise, and if there are issues, then get those addressed. And certainly a big thing in today's world, and it's there are some that might believe it's a catchphrase. Certainly it is not, is the cancer threats that face us. So the physicals, I've worked at length with Clear Choice MD. Those are the folks that we would contract with to do these physicals if we were fortunate enough to get this funding in place. The physicians that they have do these physicals are specifically geared toward firefighters and emergency services workers. And all of the testing that would be done is relative to early cancer screening, early recognition of cardiovascular issues, as well as respiratory issues. Another key component in there as well is mental wellness, psychological wellness for our folks. Because even though we're a small community, that can still creep up on us more frequently than not. And then certainly on the other end of it all is, and I'm not sure that there's a way that we can truly quantify this until something actually occurs, and something is found, God forbid it ever happens, but something is found with one of our folks and successfully managed from there. But the whole risk reduction for the town. And again, it's very difficult to quantify that up front until something comes about, and we hope it never does. But as we go down through our mutual aid assessment, I put in there a 3% increase. I don't think it's going to be that high. As a member of the mutual aid system board of directors, we're doing everything we can, just like we do every other year, to keep those costs down and the assessments down. This year, our increase would strictly be based upon health insurance increases
That's basically health insurance for dispatchers.
for
Is that
our
what
employees.
the-
Yep, and that's all contractual.
Yeah.
Our initial, at our last board meeting 3 weeks ago, the initial indication came through to us that our health insurance rates were going to be increasing by 10.6%. So the chief of the system is working to perhaps find alternatives, try to understand, or will be understanding why that much of an increase, because that's the largest percentage increase we've ever seen. So we're trying to understand why. So again, I put 3% in there. I don't think it's going to be that much, but I just wanted to err on the side of caution rather than anything. Our payroll was up a little bit. The reason for that, very simply, is number one, our program is working. Our call volume's up. Our duration of incidents per incident is up. Plus the fact, too, overwhelmingly, when we established that line item in stone last year, we all collectively knew that there was a little bit of tweaking that was going to have to be done the second year, because we didn't have anything firmly in, no statistics to go by for the first year. So that brings us up to par. With our fire and EMS training, that's where you'll see a big jump in that line item. And again, this is one of the two initiatives that I mentioned earlier. Again, after a lot of discussion, a lot of going back and forth amongst themselves and with me at times, the members see a huge benefit to not only for necessarily themselves, but certainly for the department as a whole, if folks start to get compensated for their training time. Obviously, a number of our folks maintain licenses, medical licenses, where a number of them are certified at different firefighting levels, so therefore the continuing ed requirements are in place. So when they started to look at it, and we started to look at it, the obvious thought at face value initially was maintain the same pay scale, if you will, hourly pay scale. And everybody unanimously said, we're not sure that's the most appropriate thing to do, simply because, yeah, it's training, it's education, so on and so forth, but it's just not necessarily the same. We can't equate that to responding to incidents and doing what we do. So they opted to go a totally different direction, and instead of that, our normal pay scale, have it revert back to what is in fact minimum wage for those hours.
$10.50.
Yeah. So within that, obviously there would be a big upfront benefit. Everybody is hopeful that this will help. This will be one more thing to help us attract new folks and get new people involved. Plus the fact that we're looking beyond all of that down the road and realizing the benefit for future members. And hopefully with that, within all that, this would be another way to prompt folks and encourage folks and allow them to gain certification to help us out even more. So the funding for that is not new to the budget. The funding for that is a direct transfer of funds from our building improvement line item, because the project that we had last year was completed. So that's just a simple transfer of funds. There's no increase to the budget for that. If I can, I just want to back up to the medical exams. And it's noted in here that increase, the only increase for that was $6,100. $1,500 was transferred from, again, the building improvement line. There's an option for an additional, I'm pretty comfortable with this. There's an option that we could actually transfer $1,000 to $1,500, I think, from our heating line item into this to further help reduce the overall increase for that initiative. Since we got our heat pumps installed this summer, we've had the heat going now for a few weeks for the apparatus floor only, off our boiler. And typically, when on startup for the heating season, we go through a significant amount of oil just to bring everything up to temperature. And because of a couple different things, number one, the way we run the controls now, and number two, the fact that we're only heating essentially half of the building off the boiler right now. The other half we're heating with the heat pumps. We've used hardly any oil. So I'm equating that over the heating season, we'll probably save a couple deliveries, which will equate to that savings. So if the thought is that if everybody's on board with that we could potentially simply transition some of that money from one line item to another, we could do that. The only other significant change is, and I'm assuming, Karen, everybody's aware we applied for an AFG grant.
Not yet.
Okay, we applied for an AFG grant. As a matter of fact, we've did the final submission yesterday. Assistant Firefighters grants through the program through FEMA and Department of Homeland Security. It's a federal grant. It's a competitive grant process. With our submittal, that totaled just shy of $190,000. And that makes us, the town responsible for a match,
10%.
5%. So, our match for, if we're fortunate enough to receive this grant, our match would be just over $9,000. I intend, because I don't know what we're gonna do in the future, and I didn't think it was right to have that line item, if it's established, to have it be up and down every year. That causes more problems than anything. So I put $12,000 in there for that, to fund that. And that would be our local match to any federal grant that we go for. And it would be fortunate enough to receive. On
Not
the,
restricted to federal, I mean, state.
no, absolutely, right. We could use it, and certainly
Great.
there would be no expenditure, as far as I'm concerned, no expenditure from that line item without board approval. On our anticipated income, or anticipated revenue line, we show, I don't have it there, it's back here. We're showing, what did I put in there, 100 and,
82,000,
how much, Karen?
182,000.
Okay, yeah. So that's what we would anticipate receiving through this grant this year, if we're, again, fortunate enough to receive it.
I think you're talking two different numbers, though.
Right here, anticipated revenue, it's on the second page.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was looking at, yeah.
So if we choose to, on the expense side for that line item, we could certainly decrease that $12,000 down to $10,000. And all that would mean is that in the future, when we apply for grants, I just have to watch what we, either number one, watch what the final amount comes to for the grant and be cognizant of that restriction, or if our share would be over, then come to the board at that point for approval for extra expense.
I mean, it might make sense to put it at somewhere, I mean, I would assume in any given year, 182 is gonna be big, but of course a 5% match is small.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
you know, if you were doing a 10% on a $100,000 grant,
Right.
it's still 10,000 bucks.
Right.
I mean, if we set that up for all practical purposes as a restricted fund,
Yep.
that, you know, would be a grant reimbursement fund or whatever
Right.
it wanted to be, you know, the likelihood of you spending 10 grand every year, I think would
be
relatively small.
Absolutely.
So that 10 might be a good place to start,
Okay.
see what happens for
Yeah.
5 or 10 years.
Right.
And
I
adjust
know,
that.
obviously, for this grant,
Right,
that if we
That's a
reduce
little
that to
bit,
10, that would be fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna be fine.
I mean, the other thing is, you know, I would say, you know, just in general, encouraging you to look for grant monies is a good thing, so having more money available for that, you know, I mean, you get another one for 30,000 bucks for something else with a
Right.
10% match, and
Right.
you've got your 3 already in
Right.
there. But
Yeah.
again, if we set it up as a restricted fund so that the balance remained year on year,
Yep.
then you'd
And,
accumulate and be able
This
to.
year, we
get
already
some.
received 2 other grants for dry hydrant installations through the state. One of them actually we're installing tomorrow, and then the other one will be in the spring. We requested and received an extension on that.
Good.
So, yeah, and obviously, every opportunity we have, we will, you know, we will.
And Tom is writing these grants. He's doing all the work.
Good.
What's
Thank
the AFG grant for? What would it go towards?
It's, what we applied for funding for are all new breathing apparatus and replacement hydraulic rescue tools.
Good.
Okay, so this is a draft budget for the fire department.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments on that based on that meeting yesterday, I attended a meeting yesterday that was about just emergency management in general with a couple specific things, but a large part of the discussion was recruitment and retainment. And I
Yeah.
think that, you know, this medical services exam, it's sort of separate from that, but it's an additional something that is not terribly expensive for us. And also the 5,400 you're proposing to be for the payment for our per diem time. You know, there were several people there from other departments and other parts of the state saying, even with some extra money, that doesn't help them with recruitment and retainment. And I think we're in a fortunate position right now anyway, and hopefully that doesn't shift, where this has been a carrot that's been valuable to you for that purpose. And for comparatively, when you look at, for example, hiring even one additional part-time or full-time, this is a pretty darn good investment as far as that's concerned.
It's a very
So,
good investment.
I think
And it's
that-
an incentive.
exactly,
Yep,
as far as
yep.
incentive is concerned. And just so people know, for example, that $10 an hour for training time, for firefighter one, the requirement now is 184 hours, is that right? So for an investment of roughly $1,800, we're talking about getting somebody up to firefighter one, which is significant. The other thing that was good, I thought, which Pete Lynch was talking about, was that incremental approach to firefighter one of being able to sort of knock off parts of it at a time.
Right.
That's really useful for people. But I think that $10 an hour for training is, again, a good investment on our part, and a good nugget for those who are saying, boy, I really should be doing, you know, this, that, or the other thing with my evenings, to be able to say, you know, it's not a lot of money, but at least I'm not losing money. You know?
And one thing that I continue to hear is this allows our families to let us do
To sort of justify it.
what we need
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you lump it all together, the pay for calls, if we're fortunate enough for your approval, we receive the funding for pay for training and the medical exams, all those figures combined still isn't
A fraction.
one full-time employee's salary.
Yeah. No, and the other thing relative to that discussion that relates to this as far as the medical exams are concerned, which you indicated but didn't specifically address, is the fact that the toxicities that people are exposed to in fires these days, just because of the building materials
I mean,
and
the things that
vehicles and
we've
so
done
on.
most recently to help counter that and keep our folks well is phenomenal. I mean, the guys they're washing their gear all the time.
Yeah.
We invested in second sets of hoods and Nomex hoods and gloves for everybody, so after every exposure,
Reduced exposure.
exactly, they're washed, they transition to their spare sets. So this is, and if we look back in time, not too awful long ago, we've actually had 2 events with our members, medical events. One was significantly more serious than the other, but had we had physicals in place, there's a strong likelihood,
Yeah.
number one, that those issues forthcoming would have been found, would have been corrected, and potentially those folks would still be with us.
Yeah.
So, and God forbid, neither one of those events were worse than they ended up being.
Yeah.
Or else we, you know, it would have been much worse for all of us.
Yeah, I think we also ought to consider, I mean, I definitely appreciate your willingness to, and I totally understand that the building improvement budget last year was significant for specific
Right,
reasons.
right.
But I don't think, particularly in the interest of, well, the Energy Committee working with Windham Regional Commission, et cetera, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that the building, we can continue improving it.
Oh,
So-
absolutely.
So, you know, whether we choose to maintain a certain amount towards building improvement, which, you know,
Yeah,
either
well,
through the
left-
Energy Committee or through you, is decision-making process of what, but, you know, the reality of all of us, in the interest of, you know, trying to wean ourselves more and more off of fossil fuels, you know, can we put X amount more into the building per year and have that in 5 or 10 years eliminate the use of fossil fuel for the purpose of heating the building?
I left in there $2,500, which is where we started with that new line, when that new line item was established.
Right. X number of
3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
So it reverted back to that.
Yeah.
Because over the last 2 years, we had different projects in place.
And it may be that, you know, there's overlap with funding of, I mean, we used to fund the Energy Committee to a larger amount with the idea of them having a budget in order to sort of make proposals and do them. So, you know, what that overlap would be, I don't know, but I just think we all have to be particularly cognizant of reducing our footprint, because it's not getting better with time, so, but
Yeah.
thank you for adjusting appropriately, but. All right, well, as you well know, we'll be working through it and may drag you back in at some point, but that seems like a good start, so.
Good.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, Conservation Commission projects and goals, Ann.
Yeah, I didn't realize you would be so efficient with the first part of the meeting. So
Right.
part of our contingent is not here.
You got 4 minutes in.
I got one.
I told her 15.
That might be a stretch.
So
Maybe 7.5.
I just do want to review really quickly what we would like to cover at another meeting when, you know, when we have time.
This is Ann Carey.
The tracking program, which has been going on for 6 years, as everybody knows, is actually wrapping up. We have a draft map of places where wildlife cross our roads in Putney. And the map tells you a lot more than just that. Jan Silka has been combining it with his habitat block map, which shows key blocks of habitat for wildlife in Putney. So that's going to be sort of something we would like to talk about more in depth. The Southeastern Vermont Watershed Alliance wrapped up the summer with the water testing. I'll bring in a map and we're going to review sort of where we stand, how we've been working the sites. We keep switching a site here and there as we know more about where the problem tends to be most concentrated. This is the problem of very high E. coli rates in Sockett's Brook. The portal bridge behind the Putney Central School wasn't as good this summer as we would have hoped, but it's better than the other sites. But as the water comes down into town and goes down past the paper mill, things get really bad. And there have been occasions when we've had so many E. coli colonies that it's a greater than number, greater than 2,000. And the place where you want to be is no more than 235 colonies per 100 milliliters. So
And do we have any way of knowing what the sources of that are? I mean, I know that, for example, beavers can be a source, but do we also, I know also failed septic systems can be a source. So I'm guessing we can't really determine.
we don't know yet. There was a project undertaken by the town to run a camera through, I believe it was all the septic system pipes. And one fracture in one pipe was found, and that was on the other side of Route 5, behind the Putney Diner, in that general vicinity. And Simon's Operations did a dye test and put red dye in the toilet and see where it goes. And none of it came out on Sockett's Brook. And shortly thereafter, the whole sewage wastewater treatment plant sort of turned red. So that meant basically that everything was going where it's supposed to go. So
But we also know that there are a number of private systems upstream on Sackett's Brook that
yeah, I think
would
that's
be adding to that.
Yeah,
But-
so it's high in the water behind Kimball Hill. The beaver seems sort of not involved. The water coming from the pond behind Basketsville, the Wilson Pond is what we call it, There's a stream that comes out of there and goes into the dam, the pond behind the dam. What we did is we stopped testing the pond behind the dam, which was pretty high, and we went up Kimball Hill because we thought that was more where the problem was coming from. And indeed, that was true. So it's not so much from the wild area as from the more civilized section of town.
Out of curiosity, I wonder too, what about liquid manure?
That could be part of it.
Because there's, I mean, in the spring in particular.
Significant amount.
there's a
Yeah.
Significant amount in a number
Yeah.
of fields.
The thing is, with this things of collecting data, like the tracking program went on for 6 years. We were out tracking at least 5 times or more each winter of those 6 years. And you just have to get this accumulating data before you can really say anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know that Sevla is working with the River Conservancy, the Connecticut River Conservancy, to try to come up with more funds to try to track down what's going on and to work with the town on that. So you don't need my map now. But we can do that a little more in depth, and I'll see if they have any ideas about what the next step should be and bring those to you next time too. Joy Road, we had a small contingent of Vermont Youth Conservation Corps work on the ditches and try to do some things that will help keep that trail in better shape and prevent some erosion into Canoe Brook. So that's not a big impact on the trail, but I think it's going to be a very beneficial one. And that was arranged between the Conservation Commission and the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources to get them out here.
Joy Road to Canoe Brook.
Yeah, it's the Class 4 part of Joy Road, which is in fact used as a trail now because it's not maintained. So it starts at Leon Wood and Putney Mountain Road.
Yeah.
At the dipping hole.
Yeah.
Goes up, and then connects to a trail that goes all the way up to the Silvio Conte. So it's part of a whole trail system up there, that along the Putney Mountain Trail system. And then the road curves and goes out to Holland Hill. A section of it is Class 4, and then where the farmhouse is, it begins to be maintained and looks like a Class 2 road. And this was in the Class 4 section. And there's a little stream, there's a little stream that runs from that trail section direct into Canoe Brook, and that little stream is eroding a lot.
I just wouldn't have visualized that as far as that watershed is concerned, but I'm not questioning you, I just
Yeah, no,
couldn't quite picture.
Yeah, the owners of the land very nicely came out, the doctors, as I call them, Christine and Norman, and they said, this stream never used to look like this. 25 years ago, and it has been deeply cut in now and eroded. And the water from the trail system is rushing right into there. So we tried to get that water spread out a little more, and we tried to get ditching so the trail itself wouldn't be damaged. Invasive plants and insects, I'm going to leave till next time because we have some experts on the Conservation Commission. And so that leaves me back with the old topic of the Wilson wetland. From our point of view, the situation is pretty good.
Pretty grave.
Good. Well,
Oh.
hopefully
Sorry, I
it won't
just didn't
become
hear you.
grave.
Yeah.
I think it's good at the moment. The beavers are back. We've had reports of 2 to 3. And anyone who thinks 3 beavers can't do a lot of work, Mary can tell you otherwise. And so the water in the pond is going up. We are very much hoping to be able to maintain at least 3 feet of water in the pond and possibly 4 because one of the outstanding Vermont herpetologists, Jim Andrews, says that our turtle population in that pond will not make it through the winter unless we have that depth of water. That means the water's not freezing all the way to the bottom, in which case they'll freeze to death. And we had counted at least 150 eastern painted turtles out basking during the summer. I don't know if anyone else got other counts, but what I wanted to, of course, this makes us anxious because often when this happens, something happens to the beaver and something happens to the dams that they've built. So this is the survey of how the dams have been damaged. This is the main beaver dam that creates the pond. It didn't used to have to be there to create the pond, but that's a story we've already been through. So I gave this to you way back when. It starts in June 19, 2017, but the most recent part that you don't know about is on the back side, page 2. No, I think nothing is on that one. You get 2. You can
I'll
share.
take that.
Of course, now I don't have it.
Here.
But, thank you. Basically, in May, there was another situation with beaver dams and rising water levels. So what happened in this case was that everybody was noticing in the water behind the Putney Central School, at the main bridge across, that the waters were up quite high. And on the Hayfash stream, which is the name the kids gave to the stream, which is another, it's not really a bridge, but it's a piece of trail work, which is very nice, you know, long boards and cross boards. That's pretty much inundated, or close to being inundated. So it was clear that beaver were working somewhere. And we were just keeping track of it and trying to figure out what we should do about it. And then suddenly the water went down. And in fact, there had been a recent dam built upstream from the Sand Hill Road Bridge, which, Mary, you noticed seeing this, right? This is the dam upstream from the Sand Hill Road Bridge that you noticed maybe a year or so ago, year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's not that far, you can't see it because of the creek curve, but if you look straight up and it curves a bit, and then that's where the dam was.
Yeah, and we think that part of that dam was broken, and, you know, we have no idea, because we really weren't keeping an eye on this dam at all. That probably was what reduced the water near the Portal Bridge and so on. And the school knew nothing. I asked her if they'd asked someone if they were concerned and if they wanted to do something about it. The answer was no. And Emily Pals didn't know about it. And then the Putney Central School Forest Committee was walking the Sockett's Brook within the school land, and lo and behold, they found a dead beaver, the northern end of the school property in Sockett's Brook. Again, no sign of a conflict between beavers over territory, no sign of predation. Nothing would explain it. It was unmarked body, as it were. So I just the fact that the water went down and the beaver was dead all in the same month gets us sort of worried, especially now that things are very significantly visually changing, and anybody walking Sand Hill Road can see it. So we need to keep an eye on things. So in response to this current situation, we'll obviously have to get to work again. We think we are going to now start clearing the two culvert fences again, at least a little bit, before it freezes. And I will try. Mary has broken her ankle, as you may know, so it's the other members of the Conservation Commission who will be out there. And we also need to check the dam. The clearance now it's come up like 5 inches at the bridge since Monday. Of course, we had some rain and it may go back down again. But it's a very reasonable amount. We had worked toward a clearance of 48. It's sort of backwards. Clearance means just the surface of Sockett's Brook up to the top of the concrete abutment. So that the stream would have to go up 4 feet to flood the bridge, basically. Mm-hmm. Or in this case, it would have to go up 50 inches to get to the bridge platform. So that's what we keep track of. So we just basically, again, want to assure everyone that we want the beavers there, that we think we can manage things, and we are going to repost the land against hunting, trapping, shooting, whatever. We have to renew it every year. We do it in November, and just wanted to make you aware that's going to happen again to protect the beaver. And that means everybody, not just people from outside the town, but no one is to mess with the beaver. And then the other thing is that Emily Powell's working with the Putney Central School After School Forest Committee, has also got her signs ready, and she's definitely going to try to get that land posted definitely before deer rifle, for sure, and hopefully even before that. But hunting, shooting, and trapping have never been allowed on that land. No one assumes that it is allowed, so I think that still stands even now. And we have had some worries about how big the beaver colony would get, because we all know beavers are rodents, and then people equate them with mice, large mice. And they often get very concerned about how big the colony will get. So this does not happen. This is a monogamous pair of beavers. They apparently have a yearling with them, probably. When that yearling gets to be 2 years old, he or she leaves. So the monogamous pair generally, this sort of summarizes this, so I might as well hand this out. This is not my opinion. This is just a variety of opinions from experts. But basically, a normal beaver colony has 6 residents. The monogamous pair, the 2 yearlings, sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, and probably 2 kits, 2 or 3 kits. The situation in where we are is that there are plenty of predators in that area, animals who will take beaver, including bear, bobcat, and coyotes. So all of the young nuts survive. And Patty Smith out in Marlborough has a very interesting beaver pond, and none of the babies have survived for years, for like 3 years. And she thinks the coyotes are taking them, and she thinks that she's going to lose the whole colony. So I think we need not worry about them, becoming gigantic, but there can be as many as 4 working beavers, like the 2 adults and 2 yearlings, working out there. So I just wanted to but it's not going to be like massive numbers, because the 2-year-olds are always leaving. So that's about, and then, the other thing that's very key on Sand Hill Road that we wanted to mention now is the pond often has a great deal of turbidity because of the sediment coming down Sand Hill Road to the wetland area. And as you know, there was a grant given a couple of years ago that Cynthia got. And I guess it's a sedimentation pond that they want to put in to hold the
Brian
water.
talked
And I'll
about
let
the pond.
Karen give an update report on that, because this grant expires at the end of December.
Yes, and I spoke to Brian. It is on his radar, it is on the front burner. He does need to speak to Anita Coombs, who owns that pit right there, because he wants to put some material in there, so he doesn't have to truck it. But it's on his radar for next week, because we're running out of time. So basically, they're gonna ditch one side.
Thanks. I was gonna ask.
Yeah, and they'll put some stone in there, depending on the grade. And there's gonna be a sediment pond down at the bottom, so that water will run out of the ditch into that pond instead of going into the wetlands. But the grant does expire December 2018.
Sounds good,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm on him. Another project for Brian to get done. He's been very busy.
Good. Thank you, Ann.
See us again.
All right, Animal Advisory Board update. Janet.
Janet Goldstein, hi there. We were assigned the task of looking at the animal control ordinance and revising it and updating it. And currently we have 5 people on the board, 4 very active, 1 not as active, but still very interested, all animal people in town with some good ideas and input. We made some significant changes to the ordinance, and I'm not sure how you want me to go into all of the changes that we made now.
Comment on the change.
I can comment on some of them, and then
Yeah.
maybe at another time we can sit down and look more at the more detailed things. First off, we changed the name of the ordinance because the name of the ordinance is the Putney Animal Nuisance Control Ordinance.
That's the
And
old name.
that's the old name, and the new name is the Putney Animal Control Ordinance because obviously we wouldn't have an ordinance if there weren't nuisances. The other thing that we did do was we created a mission statement for the board, which and we also created a job description for a more detailed job description for the animal control officer when and if that should ever happen. We do have, we made some changes to the dog control area. We added, like it said Putney Landing Road, we added the words to the railroad tracks so that beyond the railroad tracks, if people want to walk with their dogs from landing to landing, they can still do that. We added the words, instead of it just saying Kimball Hill, we said Kimball Hill to West Hill Road, so that it was just clear that it goes all the way up and past the school, that dogs need to be leashed. And then we decided to omit the Fred Houghton Road and the Houghton Brook Road because they're sort of off the beaten path. There aren't that many people that live out there or travel out there really, that there's ever been a problem. So those were big. And we also omitted a huge section about wolf hybrids because it's already written in the Vermont statutes.
Yes.
And so why do we need to put it in ours as well? And we've talked a lot about this and a lot about being fair and what is fair and expectations so that everybody or as many people in town as possible can be on board with what we're doing. And so you know, we've talked about the leashing of in town and all of these roads that we have listed, and we decided that we think it's imperative that we have some signage put up at the beginning and the end of each of these roads. There aren't that many of them, and but it will cost money, which we're asking for. I don't know how much money, because I don't know how much money you can allot to us to put signage up. But you know, the High-Low Biddy Road, Christian Square, Old Depot Road, Water Street, Sand Hill Road, I mean, you know, Old Route 5, they're just very obvious town roads. But if we're going to enforce a leash law at all, we feel that it's important that people know exactly where we're talking about, and that a small sign, please leash your dog, is not an offensive thing, or it'd be a friendly reminder. We also have talked about the fines and the fees and the consequences in light of what has happened this last year with the 2 dog attacks and how to make people accountable. And it's really we don't understand how exactly to put teeth into, sorry for the bad pun, into the ordinance to make people pay a fine or to understand the severity your dog bit bit a person. We also added into the section where it says, you know, because it only said hurt or killed a person. So we've added in hurt or killed another animal. But, so,
I'm not sure you can do that statutorily, can you? I mean, it isn't statutory currently.
but we can do it in
We can.
our Putney
Okay.
ordinance.
Okay.
Is what I was
Is
thinking.
that
When I read the state ordinance, it says that, you know,
Municipalities.
the municipalities can add what we want.
And can I say something? This wasn't my purpose being here, but this rings a bell. I'm a landlord, and I didn't know about an incident with one of my tenants until weeks, until after the fact. And it was pretty horrific. And I think there's something that the private sector could do as far as housing owners that rent, that I guess it could be volunteered but show goodwill to the community, that they have some sort of restrictions on what is allowed in the apartments, being the fact that one dog, you know, they say no pets, right? So if you say no pets, then you certainly have liberty to say no more than one dog. If you say large pets, and that's within law, you're willing to say well-behaved pets. I think, I'm not a pet bull lover, but I think pit bulls get a bad rap because there are some nice pit bulls. But nonetheless, you can isolate certain kinds of dogs, and I think it would show goodwill from owners to to subject some house rules, which will eventually trickle down to more safety in the community.
Well, one of the things on our list of things to ask you guys and to bring for conversation is, so can we strongly suggest to landlords, this is what I have written down, who rent to people with dogs, to please have the tenants license their dogs within 15 days of moving in, so that we know at least where the dogs are and that the dogs are all being cared for. And it's different than, I think, being a homeowner and having a dog. I mean, we have some ideas about how to get people on board with licensing their dogs.
That's a good point.
I didn't license my dogs for like 15 years until I got on the board. because there's nobody, but because we have not followed through. So now all of a sudden, if we go through and put this all in order, all in law or whatever, how are we gonna get people on board? And I really think that it needs to be fair and it needs to be inclusive. And so we asked that the Windham Housing Trust, they own a lot of property in town, that if they have animals that are living there as service dogs or as emotional support animals, that they come and license. And those licensing fees can all be waived by law. They can all be waived.
And I know,
but we still will know who's living somewhere and that they're healthy, they're being looked after. For me, that's a big piece of the I'm that kind of animal owner, my dogs go to the vet and get taken care of. But, this way we know that who's living where, and so we don't know how do you go about doing something like that? Do we sit down as a town at town meeting and put it out there? So this is one of the things that we want to talk to you about in requiring landlords in town, not out in the village, not in the town, let me be clear. So in the village, especially where there's more than one apartment, and there could be multiple dogs living there, that they just license. And we had requested from Jonathan, but I don't think he's really clear yet on what he wants to charge for fees.
I think that as far as legality, can I speak? Could I answer? Is it okay?
Yeah.
I think on a legal point, you can't enforce a private citizen to get a driver's license, get a dog license. It's illegal if they don't, but on a private lease, a landlord has the legal capacity and right to make specific demands upon who they rent to, and any violation of those demands, I've been ready to enforce it if I get, a real problem. I take license plates and car types of all my cars that are parked in front of the Main Street here, because winter, there can be problems if people don't park their cars. So my leases say, you are in violation of your lease, and you will be evicted, if you don't follow through.
Right.
So the same thing with dog licensing. We can do
So
that.
we just
we-
figure out a way to get everybody on board.
Well, we probably don't have the authority to tell landlords what they need to require of their tenants, but we do have the authority to say if you live in town, you need to license your dog. So,
And to
you know,
make
what
sure
that,
that
sort of how
landlord-
that sifts out, but as far
But
as
to
when.
make sure landlords, or not to make sure, but to get landlords on board with reminding the people that they're renting to that this is something that needs to happen. And if they just do it as soon as they come, then they don't have to think about it again.
Yeah.
So that's something else that we spent a lot of time talking about. So besides money for the signs, what about some money in the budget for the ACL? I mean, we have what, like $1,100?
Is it 1,100 or 18?
It's not a lot of money for the amount of work that honestly they will be faced with. And the animal control officer. And so we're not the only town that's being faced with this issue. There's Dummerston, there's Westminster, and one of our board members has gone and spoken with these other towns, animal boards, and we're kind of sort of playing around with the idea of hiring one person to take care of all 3 towns. And trying to figure out the logistics of that.
Certainly not a discussion that we haven't had numerous times in the
Right,
past.
but now that there's an active AB board,
Right.
like maybe we can actually materialize this.
Yes.
And so with materializing this, a financial backing to get anybody on board
Yeah.
is something that we would like you to please take into consideration when you're writing your budget for us to approve. And certainly, if you think that this is something that you would like to do, we will jump right on it and continue to look into how it will entail working together, the 3 towns. We certainly don't need a full-time ACO, none of us do, but we need somebody who's gonna be the go-between, you know?
Which is great, because we did advertise and we had one strong candidate, but he doesn't live in town full-time. So,
No, I mean, this has been an ongoing,
right.
Well, we tried with Brattleboro.
we've circled around so
Yeah.
many times on this, and, you know, the problem, we've had numerous animal control officers over the years. They tend not to last very long, unfortunately.
Right. Well,
For any
it's a-
number of different reasons, but.
It's a difficult position to have.
It is.
And
No,
then to
I-
not be financially backed, and then to not have the backing of, like, the personal backing of the town. And I think that if we can keep an active board that they can have support from, and then we have our support from
Yeah.
you, that we might be able to hire somebody and keep somebody on board for a while.
Yeah,
And I think that'll make a big difference.
yeah, my experience has been that when we have had somebody, they more often than not end up training up to a certain point and then going and getting a full-time job somewhere with a municipality that needs them. So that's a challenge, but,
Right.
Maybe with 3 towns combined.
well, that's the
Manage to retain
discussion
one,
we've
yeah.
had a bunch of times. And
Yeah.
there've been a couple people who, it's been a sort of a per diem thing, and they've worked in several towns, but trying to put together a living from that is not easy. So,
Have you ever put it forth as a volunteer job?
What's that?
Have you ever put it forth as a volunteer position?
Oh,
It has been volunteered
Somebody
by
really
certain,
believes
by
in the
certain
policy, yeah.
people, but we've also offered some financial incentive, you know, in order to try and make it more than a volunteer job. So, you know, I mean, one of the problems with it being a volunteer job is that they have to have a certain level of training and they have to have a certain amount of equipment, et cetera. And that's how we've supported them in that in the past when we've gone that route. But, you know, it all depends also on what you expect them to be able to handle. I mean, you know, it's one thing going and talking to neighbors who are quarreling about their dog. It's another going out and shooting or containing a rabid, you know, raccoon or a wolf hybrid or, you know, whatever it might be.
I'm not gonna volunteer.
Exactly. Can get a little
Take care of the dogs, you know?
Exactly. And so hopefully if we can get somebody between the three towns, maybe there's somebody else in one of the other towns who's semi-retired or something, who would be open to, you know, dealing with this. And then okay, so we also, there's a section in here that just does not make any sense to us. We don't understand how it is, and it's under Article 8, number C, fines. It says, any person who violates any provision of this ordinance and is issued a municipal complaint ticket under Article 8 shall be subject to a civil penalty up to $200 per day. The violator will have 15 days from the date they receive the municipal complaint. For each day past the 15th day such violation continues, the violator will be charged up to $200 a day. This whole section is just perplexing to us. It does not make a whole lot of sense, nor are we ever going to get $200 a day from anybody in town for holding their dog or animal. And which leads me to a very touchy subject of you all signed an agreement with the Windham County Humane Society that very clearly states they will not take any animal deemed dangerous or any feral cat or dog. And so what are we gonna do?
Again, we've had this discussion a lot. I mean, there just are not, you know,
But what did we sign an agreement with them? Are we paying them money to be a part of their encatchment area? Then what are they encatchmenting?
well, strays,
There are many
exactly.
strays that
Very,
aren't
very
dangerous.
basically strays. And also, I mean, they've always been, whenever we've had situations that have been large and complicated, they've always been as helpful as they can be to us in that capacity. No, and we had that discussion recently when we talked about, you know, they're the only organization, for all practical purposes, what we're paying them for is to be an organization that can help us in some capacity when we need them. It's not a huge amount of money. Not that, but I hear you, and we've been talking about it. They take in a handful of dogs a year for a handful of days a year, kind of thing. We're supporting a community service for the welfare of animals. You know, we could look at that differently in the future, but you know, they have their limitations, and we can't tell them. I mean, we could just not have an agreement with them, but then you've got that many more animals that may not be dangerous and may just be found on Main Street and so on and so forth. What are you going to do with that? I mean,
Right. Well, I understand. I'm sorry, Karen.
No, if we had an ACO, we may not need their services, but at this time, we have to have some place.
Well, I mean, we would
Yeah.
still need some place to bring wandering dogs and there are a bunch. I know, you know, but the whole dangerous animal thing is the piece that we are very concerned about, that there's no contract with a vet, with them, there's nothing.
You're not gonna find anybody around that's gonna take them. I don't, that's my sense. I
And-
mean,
and so then-
we've been through this a bunch of different
So
times.
then our ordinance then, I mean, I'm asking because then we need to word our ordinance in a way
exactly, yeah.
that will address that. If you have an animal that's been deemed dangerous, then, maybe you can't leave the yard without a muzzle, whether, or
Yes.
or leash, or what, that has to be on a, no more than a 6-foot leash, or, just so we know as a board, when we go back to sit and look at this, how do we write out our fines and how do we define the consequences? Because we're having a hard time coming up with a way to make people accountable, because they really don't need to be. I mean, they need to be, but
And
there's no way to force
There's
them
no
to be.
enforcement. It's the constant problem. I mean, and it's not exclusively related to the animal or tendency. I mean, there are enforcement issues on a variety of things that we have no good answer to either. So, I mean, I think anything you can do to come up with a good enforcement idea is great, but I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. And I don't think anybody else, I don't think any other town, I don't think anybody has a good answer for that problem.
So Janet did ask the question though, if they could be tasked with getting research with other towns to see
Yeah.
where they're at and if they'd be interested in sharing an ACO.
Yeah.
So is that something the board would recommend the committee to do?
I would certainly think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm wondering too, have you chatted with ACO down in Brattleboro?
Yes.
We have in the past
We
also.
have,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, recently.
But they might, I was just wondering if they have within their ordinance, or how they, maybe they have some ideas.
Well, they have a dog, they have
A
somebody
holding,
to hire.
they have a holding pen also, I think,
Yeah.
so they-
Yeah,
They have Kathy Barrows.
right.
Right,
So she's a full-time hired city employee.
okay.
Who's the
Looking
animal
for-
control officer?
Right.
Yeah. Well, she's full-time, so probably not.
Yeah, maybe she wants part-time on top of it.
Probably not. Okay, well, there are other things in our ordinance that we made changes to, and I have a thing that I can leave with Karen for her to copy and give to you, and I did send a copy digitally to Karen of the new ordinance that's kind of cleaned up. We want to kind of do away with this fees section that kind of just sits by itself and say, okay, here are the violations, and if you violate these things and it becomes a problem, then this is the fine for that. And this is, if you pay it in so much time, or you can prove, like if a dog is caught running loose for the umpteenth time and there's no collar or tags, and, there's a fine. But if you can prove that there's rabies and certificate for the animal, maybe you can waive that fee a little bit. So we just want to work with everybody. We want it to be fair. And after the first incident, there was, all dogs need to be muzzled in town. Like, whoa, no. And then the second incident, and people are worried and concerned, as they should be. And we've got nothing. We've got these, we're working on it. We're working on having something of substance to share with the town at town meeting day, is what we would like to do. We also, to get people on board in considering money for your budget, to put some money in that we could subsidize, have a vaccination clinic somewhere, maybe at the fire department or something, where people can come with their dogs and
Which
get.
historically, of course,
which-
we've always done,
But Ben Dow always did it.
I'm not aware of another vet, I know there's nobody else practicing in town.
No, but we might be able to get somebody.
Vermont, New Hampshire, or somebody, yeah, I agree.
Somebody to come.
Yeah,
And for a day and 4 or 5 hours or whatever, 6 hours,
Yeah.
and give vaccines, but we would like to maybe offer at that time, you come, here's a discount on your vaccines, and license your dog at the same time, and
Yeah.
let's get this bundled package together.
Which is what it used to be.
Right,
also.
yes, it did.
So,
So those are some of the things that we've been really struggling with. It's been quite a conversation. It really has. We've been working really hard. We've been meeting every month since February, I think, March. January.
Abby.
Abby.
I want to say December?
December.
December.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I was gonna
Me
say,
and you.
Yeah.
And then other people came on
Yeah.
later. So we've really been full steam ahead with all of this. And,
yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add to the discussion about an animal control officer is that, you know, in my mind, by far the most logical entity to take that on is the Windham County Sheriff's Department. That we've had that discussion with them numerous times. They have shown interest at various times, but declined to actually do it ever, that I'm aware of. And their officers are neither trained nor equipped to deal with this stuff. You know, it really should be, and this, you know, maybe should be part of your discussion, is it really should be sort of a countywide, you know, there should be, in order to sustain somebody who would actually be a full-time paid animal control officer outside of Brattleboro, you know, that should be under the purview of some department, and to me, Windham County Sheriff's would be the logical department for that to be. I know they have a hard enough time recruiting police officers to cover what they need, much less animal control officers, but I do think it should be part of the ongoing discussion.
And so maybe, thinking off the top of my head, when we sign our next contract with them, we add a little something into it.
We've had that discussion with them numerous times, and they're like, yeah, that's great, but we're not gonna do it. I mean, they can't, they don't have the personnel, so on, but maybe if, you know, 9 of the towns that are served by Windham County Sheriffs all said, you need this,
right,
that might influence it. I don't know, you know,
Makes sense.
that might be another option.
because they're
Yeah,
better equipped than any of the rest of
Yeah.
us. You know?
it might be worth asking the question.
Yeah, especially again, if we have the backing, you know, 3
Right.
towns, because we've talked about it, again, with
Okay, well,
Dummerston, Westminster, but if we had a larger group all saying, you know, it also, you know, it really, it might in that case end up needing to be a statutory thing. I mean, you know, of the state, because it's a statewide problem, there's no question about
it
it.
is.
And whether, you know, we talk to our representatives or whoever and say, you know, this needs to be included in the county sheriff's purview. I don't know. I mean, that, you know, obviously that's a long-term process, but I think it's something that shouldn't be ignored. Yeah.
Okay, so we will get on reaching out to the other towns and sitting with them and having a conversation about sharing an ACO and what that looks like to us and to them, and coming to some kind of conclusion, and then reaching out as a group. When that happens, reaching out as our group to the other towns in the Windham County Sheriff and catchment area, and saying, hey, you know, if maybe, yeah.
And maybe the legislators, consider reaching out to our legislators and talking to them about this.
Yeah.
Michael Murphy is the person you talked to about that.
Mhm. Yeah, it all comes back around to people being accountable and people wanting to be accountable, and I think that we can make a big piece of this appealing to townsfolk.
Well,
And getting their dogs licensed and kind of coming together and, you know, addressing these issues.
again, as far as accountability and enforcement is concerned, in all reality, it's the Windham County Sheriffs that potentially could do that for us, that they don't. And I recognize we've had this conversation. I'm not trying to say, you know, I just think it needs to be an ongoing conversation with them, because I know we're not the only ones trying to encourage that, but you know, we can't ask an animal control officer to try and go out and collect fines from somebody. I mean, that's just not realistic. So, you know, sort of how that works, I don't.
Yeah, it's, yeah. So, anyway, Thank you.
May I
Thank you.
say thank you to the group?
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
so active, and it's good to see, and they've done a lot of work on this ordinance,
Yeah.
and I know it's been a lot of work. And they've all done individual pieces, so thank you very
Thank you
much.
all.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. You're welcome, and.
Keep it up.
We'll have a finished ordinance before town meeting, so that there's something that I can get up at town meeting and say, okay, folks,
Yeah.
you know, April 1st is coming, let's everybody license our dogs and whatnot, education and.
Yeah, no, and I think for a lot, and I'm guessing, you know, not at all pointing a finger at our previous clerk, but I think Jonathan is interested and able to promote that in a way
Yep.
that we just historically haven't for any number of different reasons, and we need to
Yep.
follow up on that.
Yeah, and doing an online thing too.
Yeah, when the new website.
When the website gets up
Yes.
and going.
Yeah.
Having an online registration, having a registration number that follows your dog, so you don't have to necessarily get a new tag
All the time.
every year. So that's
Yeah.
another expense we don't have to pay out,
Yeah.
Right.
you know, that kind of thing. So we have ideas, we've got lots of things. So we can talk another time, because now I've been talking for more than 7 minutes.
Anne gets bonus points for keeping her short.
Thanks, Ann.
Wait till next week.
Thanks, Ann. Well, we kind of merged from beavers to dogs. Both issues. But,
Well,
so
thank
thank you for hearing us and for
I'm here.
considering, more money in the budget to help support the dogs of the community.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Neil, we've been through beavers, we've been through dogs, so.
Now the rat,
Now we're at Neil.
now the rat, right?
This is Neil Maddow.
Thank you. As everybody knows, there's major foundation work being done over in the brick building. Very happy so far. I'm gonna inquire about some ordinances, because it really is critical for how I plan the completion of the job. Because in one hand, one direction that I would need to take requires an engineer who's going to be busy for another month or two, which means the best I'll be able to do would be to sure pack it until spring. The other hopeful remedy is that I get some positive answers in relationship with my question to the select board. I could button it up and actually do the concrete like tomorrow, okay? Don't have to give me, I'm not asking you to force your hand with a quick question, answer, but at least get a feel for it. What took place is that I invited Chief Goddard over to the building a couple weeks ago to ask him about when I have to do a building permit, since I'm not in the building yet, and he told me. And then he said, what are you gonna do about water and sewer? And my naiveness was that it seemed doable, logical, permissible to attach the water from the main building to that building. I'm glad I asked him, because he said, not according to the ordinances. You'd have to get a variance from the ZBA, or the DBR, is it DBR? I get all these. Right. Well, then we met with Karen, and and Tom. She stressed that this is not a zoning issue, but an ordinance issue. Without sounding that I'm being critical, but I don't believe the substance of what was written was well thought out, because it doesn't make sense, at least from my perspective, of why I can do what I would preferably do. It's about an $8,000 to $10,000 difference with engineering, more excavation, plumbing, and so forth. I called the state and spoke to the chief of the Water Resource Division that takes care of all the permits, and he said to me that there's nothing that's within their, I guess, statutes that state that anything above ground is their jurisdiction. They said that they are solely concerned about water systems that are underneath the ground. That being said, I felt pretty confident that it would be logical to attach to both buildings as long as the questions that were concerning were met, which I'm sure there are some questions about it. The buildings are on one lot, okay? It's less than an 8-foot difference between the two buildings. The two buildings cannot be subdivided, or the building that I'm speaking of cannot be subdivided because it's undersized lot, so there's no way it could be spinned off. So any concern about, well, what's a future owner going to do if he's, so that goes away. There's a pre-existing structure that it runs along both properties, so I could put the system 8 feet underneath this decking, create a structure or an enclosure that's insulated that is actually more structurally sound than if it was in the interior of the building, so therefore I don't think there's any hazard for wastewater or water. What else? It's all above ground, so it meets the state's approval, as long as that how it's done and where it's done meets the towns and the state's plumbing division, which would have to anyhow, because I'd have to get a certified plumber to meet the standards of a subdivision, so that goes away. And what else? So I really want to know how and why, and the ordinance reads that every building, regardless if it's a small building, big building, undividable building, needs a separate hookup, because a hookup, as I said, runs many thousands of dollars. So if the guy down the road has chickens, okay, and that chicken coop is 10 feet from his house or close by, and a goat shed, he'd have to have 3 separate systems, all right? Now, certainly by running them underground, you are, creating a potential hazard. But if that is sort of, somebody wants to put an addition on their house and they build a breezeway, do they need to get a separate water permit to run the house water to a separate little apartment within their house? I mean, why was that written where it becomes such a burden on a user to have that sort of expense for extending the use of what's already been paid for?
Well, first thing is those ordinances were written before any of us were on the board, so I can't speak to that personally as to what the thinking behind that was.
Sure.
I'm guessing it was based on guidance from engineers or state, or I don't know. Also, I haven't reviewed that ordinance in a number of years, so I'd have to look specifically at the section you're
I
talking
give you
about.
one reason, even though I'm trying to sound arrogant, is that I don't believe it was the state that would make this action, because the state, from their mouth to my ear, said, we're not concerned about anything above ground.
Yeah, no, I agree. That doesn't mean they didn't weigh in on it, and that's why it's in there. I have no idea. Just because they say something now.
I mean, hypothetically,
Things
it
have
could be
changed.
some things like, well, what upon a subdivision, then you have a conflict there. But I think you could prevent all those conflicting concerns by not saying that you could put it on any building. You could say, as long as it's above ground, as long as it's subdividable, so both buildings go with a sale, you can't spin them off, so that isn't a question. So, regardless of how they got there to that answer, you're the board now.
Right, no,
So,
I'm not disagreeing with you about that.
Right.
But I also can't offer you an opinion as to how I feel about it without A, reviewing
Please.
the ordinance as it is, B, talking to Tom, because he clearly interprets it, and, we rely on him for many questions like this to interpret, and he may have an opinion. I was having this discussion with somebody not too long ago, and I had remembered the point that you made, that was not subdividable. And that came up for some reason.
It would be, I'm not asking for an answer now, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm sort of a holding pattern
I guess the question, and I don't know the answer to this either, is whether we can just, for all practical purposes, allow a variance on the ordinance, or whether that has to go through the DRB.
It has to go through the DRB.
Okay, so,
And I do know there's at least 2 properties in town that, one across the street, so there's 2 buildings on one lot, they have separate hookups. There's another house with a barn, which was converted into an apartment. It's attached, separate hookups. So,
and there may be reasons other than the ordinance that people wanted to do. I don't know.
Or maybe whoever did it didn't challenge it.
Exactly, I have no idea.
Well,
I mean, we could ask
and
about
Neil's
that.
property across the street, the pizza house in the
Yeah.
house,
Yep,
one lot, separate hookups.
Correct, Harry, but you have 100 yards between buildings.
Yeah, that's a
You
different-
can build a breezeway between,
Yeah.
but your point is well
you see
taken.
what I'm
Right, yeah.
talking about
Precedent
here.
says this is
Yes.
what it should be.
Yes.
I don't know whether there is also precedent on the other side. I have no idea. I'm not aware of any. And does that necessarily make a difference to us? I don't know.
Right, could be distance, I don't know, but
But it's not our decision, is what it's the DRB's.
Well,
for a variance, but the ordinance states what it states, and it does state each building is to be connected to water or sewer if that line is there, not running one building to another building.
yeah, the other thing is, I totally understand your time pressure, Neil, but there's a prescribed process for us if we were to choose to change an ordinance.
I totally respect that.
I mean, there's waiting periods, et cetera,
Yeah, I might have
so.
done it anyhow, I just wanted to, get it as far as the project as that. It's not a huge expense for me to bring in SurePack, which is durable as a thing, button it up so it's safe and sound, and revisit it in the spring.
Yeah.
That's fine, so I'm not asking for an answer, I'm just trying to throw that. And the thing is with, in all due respect for Karen, she's just stating how the ordinance is, you don't want to create an exception, because then it sets a precedent, which I understand that. But I think it could be nuanced a lot more. I think it'd be the fact that the fact that, say, you can do it if it's certain proximity. Well, no, it has to be above ground. If you build something that is going to enclose it, it has to meet the zoning plan for a new structure. My situation is that it would be going through something that's already there, and then even if it wasn't, it wouldn't even need a zoning permit because it'd be less than 90 square feet. So there's no impact on bypassing the physical permit for construction. So, it just has to, I believe, it has to, if it does make, not exceptions, but if it does change the ordinance, then I think there's room to be more specific about what are the conditions and what are the requirements if indeed you allow buildings to combine it.
And in fact, I mean, that's the very purpose of there being an allowance for a variance that's issued by the DRB, I would say, is it allows them to take a nuanced look at
Okay,
it.
so it is a DOB, so.
Yes.
That's what,
That's what I was saying.
I'm not 100%
Yeah.
sure of that, but I assume.
Variances go
Yeah.
through the
Oh, I didn't know
DRB.
that.
But is that a variance that the DRB could allow? That I don't know. And I'm
gonna
not sure
answer
how,
that
I'm not
question,
sure how
because
that's determined.
The other issue, concern, it's not an issue, it's a concern, is that property most likely is in flood hazard
Yeah,
zone,
that's a good point.
or the river corridor zone.
Yeah.
So having something above ground, we'd have to consult with the state. And it would definitely have to go in front of the DRB for anything like that. And I do realize the state regulations have changed over time,
Yeah.
especially with wastewater.
And I don't know for sure, I was just,
Yeah,
you know,
And I don't
guessing
know.
that maybe that it was, I mean, I know that a lot of thought went into that
Right,
ordinance.
right.
Because I know the people who worked on it. But that doesn't mean it was perfect. I mean, they're never
Right.
perfect, you know, and they get, it's situations like this that
Yeah.
Karen just brought up about,
that
wastewater.
cause it to change.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that concern is that, you know, if it does come to pass where you have certain criteria, then I would say that the integrity of the structure where the water would be coming from one structure to another has to meet or exceed
A certain
the
standard.
requirements that it would be if it's inside.
yeah.
I mean,
And
you
as far as
have,
the
you have a
flood
leak, you have a
hazard is
leak in your
concerned-
basement, it leaches water out into the ground. This would actually be even heavier duty, be hermetically sealed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, very basically, we don't have a good answer for you tonight, which I know you're not expecting.
Right, right.
So we gotta research it.
Yeah.
I would hope, I don't think it's too much to ask for, that we're in almost November, that by March, you might have some better idea, because right now it's gonna
That
be.
sounds generous of you.
Well, I can't.
It's, yeah, I mean, you know, for me, the first question would be to ask Pip whether this is a variance that the DRB could actually allow, because I'm not sure
Right.
whether it is or not.
Right.
And then it would be, I think, a question of whether we could allow an exception, which I'm, as the water and sewer commissioners, I'm not sure about that either. I mean, we make exceptions for all sorts of things, but.
I think you can, and I did read that in the ordinance, that you can
Make exceptions,
Yes,
whether this is one of those things that we can
I
make
don't
an
know.
exception to,
Yes,
I don't know either.
All right,
So,
well, just,
I think there's a bunch of questions that it raises
just
that we'll
hopefully
have to
come back to
answer.
this, when there'll be some.
Further, better answer.
Yeah.
And it, yeah, I mean, depending on what we find out from, first off, from Pip, because he may well know that answer
Right.
easily, he may not. You know, it may be that the best thing for you to do, Neil, just to give you the most flexibility, is to go to the DRB and request a variance. I'm not saying that is the best way, but it may
I
be.
didn't realize that it's in their power to do. So if they give a variance, then
I'm not saying that, I'm saying
Right.
that may be.
I have to
think
ask
Pip
the
could answer
question.
that.
I'll need to talk to the chair.
It's a question of who could allow an
It's not
exception.
gonna be a structure, it's already there, it's just gonna be sealed to.
The other thing is, and Pip knows the circumstances of that, because I know when
Right.
you explored before whether it could be subdivided, I'm sure it was Pip who was involved in that, so he'd be the one that'd be most likely to be able to answer the question most
Right.
effectively.
I know that the Chief, I know his reasons, I know his factors, that he was opposed to it, I don't know why. Certainly I would like to, if it is something that is decided upon somebody in a department in the town, I think, I'd like at least to know what the criteria of no is, you know? It can't just be arbitrary, that we don't want to set a precedent, so therefore, well, you're not, you set a new, you know, variance or a new rule.
I mean, in his case, he would probably really just be following the ordinance
Right.
as it's written.
That's what he was
You know,
doing.
that's what he's supposed to
That's
do.
Right.
And whether, you know, regardless of how he feels
Well, he
about
might say,
it.
if you at first I thought about a buildable structure, he might say, well, it could be a fire chamber, it could be preventing egress, right? But as I looked at it, I said, I could just run it underneath this deck. It's like somebody's deck that connects the buildings, I just box it in, insulate it, do whatever else the licensed plumber who has to meet standards would do. So, yeah, we'll see. All right.
We'll do some homework.
And not to irritate, but was there any response? I know you're going to look at, talk to Larry Slayson about
Larry has not returned my call.
any funding
He's been
for.
busy, and I tried to follow up again this morning with him, and he was going to be in the office, and I have not heard from him from him.
So I guess the answer is no,
No,
not yet.
no.
And not for lack of trying, unfortunately.
Well,
I mean, I think
some response
that,
by April?
yeah.
No, I have a laundry list for him.
And I think that, Neil, you know, mine and Karen's sense, and I haven't had this conversation with these folks yet, but is that we think unless there's a legal reason that compels us not to support you financially in the process, we think it's the appropriate thing to do because of that discussion about it being a public use of a private property.
And I have no
So,
knowledge of, but Josh Perry, who works in many
Yeah.
towns, he said he's never gone to a town that the village doesn't consider the walkways regardless of when it was dated. I'm not looking for maintenance, I'm not. looking
right,
to-
no, that would be,
To
you
shovel
know,
my, walkway.
yeah, I think as we talked about before, it would be very big, I mean, unless Larry says, no, you can't.
And I hear all the things in the history, is that I think it was their older sidewalks and pre-existing.
They predate,
It
yeah,
kind of like fell off the radar.
Exactly.
When everything started to evolve.
yeah, yeah.
All right, have a good winter, everybody be healthy and well, and I will be loving you.
I have your number.
And it looks,
I got your number too.
yeah, it looks good. Bemis is doing a good job for you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Neil. All right, so,
Thank you.
You
See ya.
too.
okay, so how quickly can we move through the rest of this? Cargill.
So is
So this is a contract for salt from
Yes.
Cargill.
So-
This is the same estimated tonnage I think we've typically done in the
300
past.
tons, yes.
Was that
Do
sufficient
you have
last
the
year?
original there, Karen?
I do have the original, yeah. It is, this is what he usually gets.
Okay.
So the state bid came in, it was a little bit lower, but Brian's recommendation is to stay with Cargill. Only because the salt is delivered to Bellows Falls. So at any time, if he ever ran out and there was a shipment up there, they could just go up, get
And
a
pick it up.
truckload and come back.
So it's for security.
Yes. This other company he has never heard of, and they're out of Rochester, New York. So they
But
were-
it's through the state of Vermont.
No, we would set up an account with the company,
Which is who?
is Appalachian Salt out of Rochester, New York.
And what's the price difference?
They were $75 per ton, and Cargill is at $79.88.
Ballpark $1,500.
Yes, it's like $1,500 difference.
On how big is the contract overall?
300 tons.
Right,
So,
at 80,
this is what.
so
it was
24,000?
Yeah, it was $23,964 if we went with Cargill. So, and
Has-
Brian's run out before and called
Yeah,
them.
no,
my
that
next
was-
question.
that was-
They were right there with a delivery, so he likes them
That
because he can
$1,500
rely
is
on them.
secure.
So for the difference,
I like our road salted.
yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't object to that, so,
okay.
Yeah.
want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the bid of $79.88 per ton from Cargill for de-icer salt
For an estimated 300 tons.
for an estimated 300 tons. So.
Yeah.
I second that.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the contract with Cargill for de-icer delivered at $79.88 a ton. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did
Okay,
you want to sign this, or you want me to sign it?
I can sign it, then you got it right there.
Yep. So right down there.
Thank you. Okay, so, Fish and Wildlife Agent Application Packet.
So Jonathan Johnson gave me this packet. This is state of Vermont for the town to issue,
Fishing and hunting licenses?
Yes,
Oh, that'd
yep.
be great. Okay.
So the only reason I have it in front of you, Scott Henry has signed it as the treasurer, but the state will have to access our checking account for ACH deposits and withdrawals.
Do we have any concerns about that?
No, and other towns do it the same way, and there's no issue.
I
The
mean,
state does do ACH deposits into our account already for, our highway monies and, current use and all that stuff. State payments, all that stuff gets dropped right into the checking account automatically by the state.
Sounds very
So-
logical to me.
Yeah.
Have we ever done licensing here before?
Long time ago.
Okay.
I did more than 25 years ago, probably, would be my guess.
Really? Wow.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, the other difference is we used to have at least one, Sam Howard, and again, this was 25 years ago, out of what was the store across from Mountain Halls.
Yeah.
They used to sell licenses. They stopped doing that a number of years ago. And then obviously they're not still there. And I'm trying to think, there was at least one other place in town that did, I think. But the town hasn't for a long time.
Do we get a percentage of each license sold? Is there a?
Yeah, it's like $1.50. Yeah.
So we'll make
So we're gonna make
real money. Yeah. It's, I mean,
It's a service.
exactly,
Yeah.
no, and a number, over the years, many people have sort of lobbied for that service to be available,
Yeah.
and it was something Anita just chose not to do, and that was
Right.
obviously her right.
Did
to
he
do,
just
so.
take this upon himself?
Jonathan?
Yeah.
Well, people were asking if he was
Nice.
I'm
gonna
sure, yeah.
utilize that service here.
That's
So,
fantastic.
Yeah, so something new in the
Yeah.
works.
So, do we need to approve this, or not? We need to approve the state for ACH withdrawals,
Yes, yeah,
which they already have, so I
right.
guess it would be for
this
this
purpose.
purpose.
Yep.
All right, so make a motion to approve the
Yeah, there you go.
authorization for variable withdrawals, ACH, and automatic deposits with the state for the sale of hunting and fishing licenses.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve authorization for variable withdrawals for hunting and fishing licenses. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Windham Regional Commission representative appointment.
Okay.
Oh,
So I was asked to sit in on some meetings with Windham Regional Transportation Committee. Alice Mays is currently the representative, but she's not active. So I was approached by Windham Regional and I asked.
and you can be?
I can be,
Okay,
only because I'm working for the town.
yeah.
And just because I live in Newfane, I'm able to do this
And-
on behalf of the town.
And you're willing, are you happy to do it, or
It's-
just willing?
Actually,
It's probably valuable for you in a way.
it's
I
very
would think.
valuable. I just
Yeah.
found out about some grants, and
I'm
I'm
sure.
like, so this is
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
And
no,
this
I
is
would
the
think that
type
would be-
of resource the town needs.
Absolutely, no, we've
Yeah.
had, I mean, we've talked about that, the other thing that I would encourage you is to keep an eye out for anybody else who you think would be a
Yes.
useful
Yep.
co-appointee
I'm
for
hoping
you.
by town meeting, we can have some brochures out there with all our vacant
Yes,
seats.
no, and Alice has always, she has done it for a number of years now,
Yeah.
but she has always expressed a certain level of frustration of not quite knowing how to take advantage of her position there, and so somebody who was a little bit more, not that she wasn't proactive, but
Right.
a little bit more able to sort of take that on in a way that we could benefit the most from it.
Right.
which
You're engaged
you
in all
will
the
be able to do.
systems.
Yeah,
No, no, this will be good for both myself and the town,
Yeah.
Good.
so.
Well, thank you for doing that.
No problem. I
Yeah.
just need a motion and a
Yes.
signature.
I'll move to appoint Karen Astley to the Windham Regional Commission as the Putney representative.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded, and we're not gonna have any further discussion because she might change her mind. To appoint Karen Astley to the Windham Regional Commission. And Alice is still
She-
a representative.
she is,
and-
So she's your second?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because Arthur Westland?
Westing
Westing.
Yeah,
So he's
was, but they moved out of town.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there's somebody's signature on that one, please.
How many meetings a month do you have to go through for that? Is it like 1 a month or?
1 a month.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
that's
reasonable.
No.
Oh, it's gonna
They
be.
didn't tell you, but.
Oh, wait, you didn't read the small print?
4:30 to 5:30, they stay on schedule.
Schedule.
Nice.
Sounds good.
So it's been great.
Okay. Okay, WSWMD appointment of Dan Toomey. Did Dan agree to do this?
He's on the board, actually.
Yes.
And for some reason, Windham Solid Waste never received confirmation that he was gonna continue.
Okay.
So all I need to do after your approval is to send Robert Spencer an email.
Okay.
Just designated him as a representative for Putney.
I vaguely remember having done this
At town
shortly
meeting.
after March,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if the information just didn't
Never,
get to
never
him.
got there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm.
And I, again, will just say thank you to Dan, because Dan
Yeah.
has done this for a long time and
Yeah,
very effectively, and
yeah.
it's really appreciated. So.
Yeah,
motion-
so I'll move to appoint Dan Toomey as the representative, Putney for WSWMD.
I
Board of
second,
Supervisors. No, sorry.
let you finish. I second that.
And if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, so grant agreement.
So I just got the grant agreement for Windham Windsor Housing. This is the federal grant. It just
Is
came
this to
in.
close it out?
No, this is to get, it's a grant agreement resolution, and it needs to be signed off by the legislative body. And it's a requisition to get the grant money sent to the town. And then what happens is we loan that money to Windham Windsor Housing. And it's a loan, it's $500,000, so.
This is for Putney Landing?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
And the reason this is happening now is because the project is completed and it couldn't be gotten until the project was
right,
completed.
so there's
Okay.
a lot of steps to
Yeah.
these federal grants, but what'll happen is we'll loan the money to Windham Windsor, it's like $490,000. They have 30 years to pay it off,
And they, yeah,
and if they get to the 30 years, they can have an extension of
They-
another 30 years, okay? So basically, what'll happen with this loan is the town will manage it for a period of time, however, 30, 60 years, whatever it takes. But that $10,000 will be used for administrative fees
Administrative.
and legal fees, because Larry has some stuff he needs to do as well. So signing this grant agreement resolution tonight gets the ball rolling for the requisition for the money.
This might be a silly question, but what's the incentive for them to pay it back if they?
There is
I mean,
none.
is there really, it's,
There is none.
this is very typical of affordable
Yes.
housing projects.
Yes.
You know, really what it is it's a vehicle for them to grant money.
Like a pass-through or?
Exactly.
It
I
is
mean,
a
it's,
pass-through.
you know, it's
It is- yes.
technically it's a
Yeah.
loan from us, but we do, VHCB does a lot of this, of
Yes.
loaning money with, in all reality, no intent to collect. Many of them are then, more often than not, what happens to them in my experience is that, and hopefully this won't be the case in this instance, but historically, at roughly the 30-year mark, many of these projects have needed refurbishing. So essentially, this then becomes almost like a collateral towards renegotiating a further loan for X amount of time in order to keep it perpetual. It's a way of keeping it affordable in perpetuity so that they're never having to pay it
Exactly.
back.
That's
And,
the way
there's a lot of people who object to this for any number of different reasons, basically because it's money being put into something, but it's the only way that affordable housing can honestly exist.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yes, there's no incentive for them to pay it back, and they would never be called on it, I don't believe.
Okay.
Not my experience.
Right. So this resolution also gives myself the authority to sign,
Administer.
execute, and administer the loan over a period of time.
And you're reasonably confident that that 10,000 is a sufficient number
Yeah,
to
Nathan said.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when that 500,000 comes in, would you likely just give that to them in almost its entirety?
490.
Yeah,
490,
490,
yeah.
yeah. And again, it's a loan, so the grant comes in, it's loaned out to them, and then we just manage.
And because of the way these are structured with, you can't collect the money, and it's just like our highway projects, you can't collect the money until the projects are done. So the financiers of that project have already paid the contractors for the project, and so basically this is a reimbursement of funds that have already been expended.
Right,
So,
yeah.
Interesting.
model, yes. It's the only way they can, I mean, that aspect of it is the only way they can guarantee that they don't shell out money and then have projects uncompleted, so
Yeah.
sort of works backwards.
Yeah.
But it works,
You have a beautiful new facility, so.
yes.
All right, so I'll move to, see how do I word this, to accept the grant agreement resolution. And this is, well, it's for Windham, Windsor, but who is this from? Oh, here we go.
So basically that's,
Yeah. I'll move to accept the grant agreement resolution. I'm not really sure how to, is it all through the? Okay.
Department of Housing and
Right.
Community Development.
Department of Housing and Community Development. Sounds good.
I second that.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve a grant agreement resolution with the Department of Housing and Community Development in the amount of $500,000, is that correct?
yes.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye. Is this the one we signed?
Yes, it is, so, yeah. There you go.
Okay, so sidewalk, I don't remember what you said you were gonna talk about sidewalks.
That was Neil.
That was
Isn't it?
Neil.
Oh, was it? Oh, because he was an addition, that's right,
Yeah,
sorry.
Right,
Did,
right.
but speaking of sidewalks, did the state approve and,
They're still working on that.
okay.
Yeah, RSG.
You can't hurry them.
Well, the engineer has the plans, so if they're
Right,
revised,
yeah, yeah.
they'll go back to the state.
And then it'll go back to the state, right.
Yep. Thank you.
It's one of those things, the more you hurry them, the slower it goes.
I won't
All right.
compromise.
All right, warrants, right?
Well,
Oh, town manager report,
I
sorry.
don't know if I want to do all this.
Yeah, hit the highlights.
There's not really anything. The only thing I do want to mention is property taxes are due on November 16th. So that's very important. I also want to mention to you that the delinquent tax total right now stands at $143,510.10. So about a year ago, it was
Brought
over
it down, yeah.
200,000. So I just want to say, we are collecting delinquent taxes,
Good,
and this looks so much better.
good,
So we're doing really well there.
thank you. Any other highlights?
Oh, there's just one other thing I want to mention.
I'm not trying to hurt, I mean,
No,
seriously,
no, but
whatever,
this is-
you know, whatever you
this is-
need to
I
take time
think
for.
this
of
is
course.
important though, but, so we had a gentleman hanging around the off-ramp down on Putney Landing, and he was also down by, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was informed today that he had an outstanding warrant, and he was arrested and,
Processed.
yeah, but apparently it was in Windsor County, up near Heartland, Hartford, so he won't be around.
I think the same guy who was here last year.
Yeah.
And
I
he-
didn't recognize him from
I
before,
did.
but you
Yeah.
did, yeah, but he may well
Yeah,
have been.
and he's
yeah.
hanging out on the gateway.
I remember, I saw him, yeah, no, I saw him,
Yeah.
I saw
No,
him there.
He was living
but-
there, actually, his
Oh, he
stuff
was?
is still there.
Oh.
So, one other thing, the gravel pit, there was a memo that came to me late this afternoon. I just want to give this to you. It's an estimate of remaining material that Stevens and Associates have calculated to be in the pit. So I just want to put it out there in front of you. There will be more discussion about this, and
How much were we hoping for total? Did, jog my memory.
We weren't necessarily hoping, I mean, it's a time frame. You know, each of the towns uses roughly 12,000 yards per year between sand and gravel, ballpark and half, and those are a little generous. You know, we really only use about 10,000 a year. So, you know, if you look at, you know, just to make it a round number, if you look at each of the towns, if the two towns together use 25,000 a year, this puts us on the order of 4 times 7, 28, 30 years out. I think we were hopeful that it
40.
would be longer than that.
Yeah.
I think that I think I told you guys last time that question of being able to lower the floor of the pit would
Give us
fairly
more.
dramatically change this number. So I don't know whether, I mean, I don't think that was part of the original discussion
No.
with Stevens, but they could probably relatively easily estimate that for us.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that now doing some sort of a financial accounting of what this means as far as payback terms, et cetera,
You have
is
tie
gonna
it
be
in,
the key to
see if it's
see
gonna
what
be- yeah.
see what makes sense.
And this, in addition to the material above, we've calculated a rough ballpark, yada, 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 to be approximately 200,000. What does that mean for us?
Oh, yeah. So, as it is now, in the SB Lands pit, really the only thing remaining is ledge.
Right.
So everything else is down to that bottom level. So the downside of that ledge is that it's much more expensive to process. The upside of that ledge in the long term is that we have it. And at some point, because of the lack of gravel and sand in the state, we're all going to be using ledge for those purposes. Well, you can't really use it as sand because it's not a good product for that, but for ledge and for road building and for gravel, it's a good product, but it's relatively expensive. But there's a general consensus that 25, 30 years from now, we're all going to be using ledge because there's nothing else to use. You know, as the number of pits that are available and open
Yeah.
reduces. So that was kind of, you know, we all were aware that was there, but it was also sort of just recognized as, you know, this is really in some ways just a chunk of stuff to fall back on.
Right.
But the flip side of that is we want to exercise our permitting for blasting and harvesting of that ledge for a couple of different reasons. So we would probably continue to actually use that ledge over time so that we weren't then left only with ledge at a certain point. Just sort of balance the, you know, if we up
Makes sense.
our budget on it somewhat, then we're basically sustaining the lifetime of the other things. So I think, you know, if you add that in, it makes 1 million yards. I think that was sort of the number we were tossing around
And that's exactly
initially.
what Corey said today on the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Plus we have the other pit for a period of time for sand.
the carpenter thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, which we have for 15 plus more years, 17
Right,
more years.
right.
Which all of our sand will come out of. So when we look at this as, you know, the way that exercise we just went through of saying, you know, roughly 30 years, if we add into the fact that we'll, for the next approximately 15 years, we'll get all of our sand out of the carpenter pit, that cuts the demand in half for that time period, so that
Right.
extends it by roughly 7. Well, no, because it's only half of the volume, because it's not gravel. So we're up to, you know, somewhere between 35 and 40 years based on that. And then if we can lower the bottom of the pit,
Yeah.
then we're probably looking at more like a 50-year time frame at least, which is more like what we were hoping for. So
Yeah. And we're gonna do the pro forma. We'll put the numbers together.
the
and then we
numbers are
can
what's,
see.
yeah,
Yeah,
gonna
that's,
see whether it makes sense.
yeah. And Corey wanted to talk to us about that too.
Does the rock crushing equipment, does it exist on site?
No.
No, okay.
No, we would contract that.
Okay.
For a number of different reasons.
Okay.
That equipment's very expensive.
Yeah.
The volume that we would crush is
Sufficient
small
to
enough,
make it.
exactly. But what we would wanna do is budget so that we would have that happen every 3 to 5 years or something,
Right.
so that we stockpile,
Build up.
use it
Yeah.
up, stockpile, use it up. And then it's, again, in the interest of exercising the permits as well, we sort of metered that out. Not that you have to do that, but it's just, it helps
Makes
your
sense,
argument
yeah,
when you
yeah.
go to try and extend it, so. Good.
Great.
So a reminder, children's Halloween event is next Wednesday.
Very exciting.
Yeah, beware on Kimball Hill.
Sometime.
Or stay away.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's 5 o'clock to 8 p.m.,
Good.
okay?
Very good.
And that's about all I have right now.
All right, good. So warrants,
I'll move to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review.
second,
Second, sorry, distracted by these extra papers from
moved and
DCC.
seconded to execute and approve and execute warrants as presented upon review. No further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Payroll warrant dated October 19th in the amount of $9,517.81. It has the library.
What is the Goodall Group?
Goodell.
LLC? Goodell. Oh.
It's, they're Westminster Farms.
Up on Route 5.
Yeah, but,
Oh,
but they also now own, well, north of Putney Central on the Westminster West Road, there's a, when you go up, you go over the hill by the horse farm, and as you drop down on the other side, there's cornfield and barn and stuff like that. That's part of Goodell, that's one of the sons. And then they also purchased what used to be John Knopper's property, which is a large portion, no, well, actually, no, sorry, that's Paul
That's
Harrell.
Paul, yeah.
They purchased Mike Barrett's property, which was Stoneholm Farm, down on River Road, the big farm with tire piles and stuff. So I'm assuming it's mostly related to that. I don't know the details of that, but
Alright, so that's all in conservation now?
yeah, there are some exclusions from it for, farmstead area and labor housing, et cetera, but the bulk of the actual farmland is in conservation.
Payroll warrant dated October 26th in the amount of $10,347.72. So these are our monthly on-call,
Yeah.
along with rec department.
I guess he's been on there, what, Ryan?
Yep.
Ryan, I guess I keep. So used to him being in middle school and everything. Now he's a 4-year-old grown guy.
I think it's great these young guys are doing that. Those are the ones you have to invest in.
And what's he doing? He's doing,
He's an on-call.
On-call.
oh, yeah,
on-call,
okay, yeah.
Ryan?
He works, Ryan, yeah, I think he
Yeah.
works for Eric too.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
He used to babysit for me and then he grew up.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's really happy, I just didn't know that. Sorry, Ryan.
Accounts payable warrant dated 10/19 through 10/26 in the amount of $216,627.90. There are 3 vendors in here, 3 invoices that are your paving, Springfield paving, that got paid out this week, and the mower,
Yeah.
over the rail mower that got paid out this week, and RSG had 2 invoices totaling almost, well, $9,200. And then there's some assessments that I had to pay. Windham Regional and Windham Superior. For the,
That's just the annual.
well, it's a biannual one,
No.
so you pay in the spring and then again in November.
For what?
It's a tax assessment
Oh,
on population,
oh,
something the county does.
It's to support
Yeah.
county services.
Yeah,
we have, I'm kidding.
yeah.
No
I-
comment?
Well, it's so interesting that we have that conversation because I
It's
was talking
actually-
earlier with a friend about how, like
It's
in
the
other
invoices
states.
in there, and I'll explain it to you. It's like $3 per person or something like that.
And I think it's mostly to support the court system, is my understanding. I'm not sure that's right, but,
Well, that's, the check is written out too.
oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wyndham County Superior Court.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, the Superior makes, that's where my mind went right away, but.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a chunk, but.
It is. But it's done, so I think it's July and then November is the payments for the fiscal year.
Who does the, is it, the lines in the road? All of a sudden. State does that,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why, West Hill get done?
I don't know, I'm not sure if it got done, but how's that paid for, or do they just?
The line painting, I don't know if that's part of the paving. I don't
Yeah,
think
I'm not
so.
sure.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah,
It's a good
I've
question,
always
I mean-
wondered, yeah,
All I know is that they will be painting
yeah.
West Hill.
Yeah, I haven't been up there for the last couple of days, so I don't know.
Yeah. And a culvert went in on Alice Holloway.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I wasn't sure about that. I don't know if that was something the town did. I'll have to follow up with Brian.
Where?
Alice Holloway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like by Christopher's
I don't
house,
think
or-
the town, yeah, exactly,
Oh,
between
okay.
Christopher's house. There was a problem with,
A swale.
yeah, was it,
Yeah.
oh, no, no,
Remember?
no, oh, that's a different one.
Okay.
No, that's not on Alice Holloway, that's on, is it? Oh, I guess it is.
No, Joseph.
Carol Brown and then Alice Holloway.
Yes,
Oh, right,
yes,
right. No,
yeah.
I was, Carol Brown is the one by Christopher, which is,
Right.
no, it's because what happened was, there had been a big swale there, but in order to service the pumping station that's there, the town accesses, so they had filled in that swale,
Oh.
and in fact, what had happened is that had blocked up and caused significant erosion on the Gateway property. So
Thanks, yeah.
the town put the culvert in to prevent that from happening again.
And Brian's been out with the grader. He's up on Old Town Farm Road today. But Russ Ellis is doing the leaf blower.
Oh, the blower?
Yeah, yeah, so they're doing that now too.
I did notice the mowing after our last meeting, it looks good.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, Brattleboro, BDCC,
So this is just information.
yeah.
I mean, if anyone would like to attend, they can. I mean, it's not mandatory that we be there, but
So that is November 1st from 4:30 to 7:30, and is that open? Oh, well, that would be open to the member towns. is that
Right, right.
Yeah. And then recognition of the Vermont Land Trust acquisition of development rights for the Goodell Farm.
And that also is information, I thought it was important that you know about this. I'm also probably gonna give it to Conservation Commission, Planning Commission, as an FYI.
All right, and we do need to have an executive session?
We do, and I believe we need to make a decision.
Okay. Motion to enter executive session?
So move.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to enter executive session under Title I VSA 313, the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer, employee, et cetera, as printed. And we will invite Karen to join us.
Jonathan is still here.
Is going to join us also, okay. So if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. So we came out of executive session at 8:30 and are happy to announce that we are appointing John Johnson as no longer the interim town clerk, but as the town clerk of Putney. And glad to have him on board. People seem very happy to have him. He's very happy to be here, and that's all I got to
There
say.
you go.
Can I add anything?
It
I think
works.
that's it. Yeah, it
Don't
works.
forget to
It works
vote.
very well, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't forget to vote. And so that's that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Motion
motion to
to adjourn.
adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next
Thank you.
meeting is
Alright.
November